I should have known something was wrong when the realtor practically begged me to buy the house. My name is Michael Harrison, and I'm a freelance journalist living in Portland, Oregon. After my divorce last year, I needed a fresh start somewhere affordable. When I saw the listing for a 3-bedroom Victorian in a decent neighborhood for $45,000, I thought it was a typo. Houses in that area typically went for at least $300,000. It's a motivated seller situation, Karen, the realtor, explained during our first phone call. Her voice had an edge of desperation that should have raised red flags. The owner just wants to move it quickly. No inspection contingency needed. Cash preferred. I arranged a viewing for the following Saturday. The house stood at the end of Maple Street, slightly separated from its neighbors by overgrown hedges and ancient oak trees. The Victorian architecture was stunning, even beneath layers of peeling paint and neglect. Wraparound porch, original stained glass windows, and intricate woodwork that would cost a fortune to replicate today. Karen was already waiting when I arrived, pacing nervously on the front steps. She looked younger than she'd sounded on the phone, maybe 35, with dark circles under her eyes, suggesting several sleepless nights. "Thank you for coming," she said, shaking my hand with both of hers. "I really hope this works out. The owner is very eager to close." "How long has it been on the market?" I asked, pulling out my phone to take photos of the exterior. 2 weeks. She fumbled with the lockbox, her hands trembling slightly. "We've had several interested parties, but they all backed out after the viewing." "Why?" She didn't answer immediately, finally getting the key free and unlocking the heavy oak door. "People are superstitious. The previous tenant left suddenly and there were some rumors. Nothing substantiated, of course." The interior took my breath away. Hardwood floors stretched throughout the first level, despite being covered in dust. A grand staircase dominated the entryway, leading to the second floor. Original crown molding adorned every room. The kitchen needed updating, but the bones were incredible. "What kind of rumors?" I pressed, running my hand along the intricately carved banister. Karen walked ahead of me into the living room, where afternoon sunlight streamed through those beautiful stained glass windows, casting colored patterns across the floor. The tenant claimed he heard things at night, footsteps when he was alone, doors opening and closing. He said he felt watched constantly. He moved out after 3 days. I laughed. "And people actually believed that?" "There were others before him," she admitted quietly. "A young couple lasted 2 nights. A single mother with her daughter made it 3 days. Before that, an elderly gentleman left after his first night, though he died of a heart attack 2 weeks later. His family sued the owner, claiming the house caused his death, but the case was dismissed." Now she had my attention. "How many tenants has this place had in the last year?" 7. Karen met my eyes. "But that doesn't mean anything supernatural is happening. Old houses make noises. People get spooked. The power of suggestion is very real." I walked through each room methodically, taking notes and photos. 3 bedrooms upstairs, each spacious with tall ceilings. 1 bathroom that definitely needed renovation. A small attic accessible through a pull-down ladder. The basement was unfinished but dry, with a newer water heater and furnace. Everything seemed normal, better than normal for the price. "I'll take it," I said when we returned to the living room. "I can have cash ready in 48 hours. Karen's relief was palpable, but something else flickered across her face. Concern, guilt. "Are you sure you don't want to think about it? Maybe spend a night here first. I've lived in New York City apartments with rats and no heat. I think I can handle an old house with creaky floors." I smiled, already imagining how I'd renovate each room. "Besides, I don't believe in ghosts." She nodded slowly, pulling out the paperwork from her briefcase. "The owner will be pleased. He's been very anxious to sell. I'll draw up the papers tonight and we can close by Tuesday if you're ready." We spent the next hour going over details. The owner lived overseas, she explained, and had inherited the property from a relative. He'd never actually visited it himself and just wanted to be rid of the burden. The sale would be handled entirely through her agency and a local law firm. As we walked to our cars, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the overgrown lawn. A neighbor, an older woman with silver hair, watched us from her porch next door. When I waved, she quickly went inside and closed the door. "Friendly neighborhood," I muttered. Karen followed my gaze. "That's Mrs. Patterson. She's lived here for 40 years. She knew the original owners before they passed away." She hesitated, then added, "She could tell you stories about this place if you asked. Though I'd recommend you don't." "Why not?" "Because sometimes ignorance really is bliss, Mr. Harrison." Karen got into her car. "I'll call you Monday morning with the closing details. Congratulations on your new home." I watched her drive away, then looked back at the house. In the fading light, it did look somewhat ominous, but I chalked that up to atmosphere. Every old house looks creepy at dusk. I spent Sunday researching the property's history online. The house was built in 1897 by a wealthy timber merchant named Theodore Ashworth. He'd lived there with his wife and 3 children until 1912, when the entire family disappeared without a trace. The case was never solved, though local legends suggested they'd been murdered and buried somewhere on the property. The house changed hands several times over the decades, with various families reporting strange occurrences, but nothing concrete enough to deter buyers. In the 1970s, it was converted into apartments, then back to a single-family home in the 2000s. The recent string of short-term tenants was new, starting only 18 months ago after the last long-term resident, an art teacher named Margaret Chen, moved out suddenly after living there for 5 years. I found her obituary dated 6 months later. Cause of death, suicide. I closed my laptop, trying to ignore the chill running down my spine. Coincidence. Old houses collected stories like they collected dust. It didn't mean anything. Tuesday arrived and I signed the papers at the law office. Karen handed me the keys with what looked like an apologetic expression. "Good luck, Mr. Harrison," she said. "I hope you'll be happy there." "I'm sure I will be," I replied confidently. I moved in that afternoon with my few possessions, a mattress, some furniture, and boxes of books and clothes. I'd sold most of my things in the divorce, so starting fresh felt appropriate. By evening I had the basics set up, my bed in the master bedroom, my laptop on the kitchen counter, serving as my office. That first night, I ordered pizza and sat on the porch, watching the neighborhood. Mrs. Patterson appeared on her porch briefly, stared at me with an unreadable expression, then went back inside without a word. No other neighbors acknowledged my presence. Around 11, I decided to call it a night. I locked all the doors and windows, checked that the basement door was secure, and headed upstairs. The old stairs creaked under my weight, which I found oddly comforting, real, normal. I brushed my teeth in the bathroom, changed into sleep clothes, and climbed into bed with a book. The house settled around me with the typical sounds of old wood adjusting to temperature changes. I read for an hour before turning off the light. That's when I heard it. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming from downstairs. I lay perfectly still in the darkness, straining to hear over the pounding of my heart. The footsteps continued, moving from what sounded like the living room toward the kitchen, steady, methodical, the unmistakable sound of someone walking across hardwood floors. My rational mind kicked in immediately. I'd locked all the doors and windows myself. I'd checked them twice. Maybe it was the house settling, or pipes expanding, or any of a dozen logical explanations that had nothing to do with an intruder. But those sounds had rhythm, pattern. They were footsteps. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand, ready to call 911, and crept to the bedroom door. I eased it open, wincing at the slight creak of the hinges. The hallway stretched before me, dark except for the faint moonlight coming through the window at the far end. The footsteps had stopped. I stood frozen, listening. Nothing. The house was completely silent now, almost oppressively so. Even the normal sounds of settling seemed to have ceased. "Hello?" I called out, feeling ridiculous. "Is someone there?" No response, of course not. I turned on the hallway light and made my way downstairs, phone in hand with 911 ready to dial. I checked every room on the first floor. Living room, empty. Kitchen, empty. Dining room, empty. All doors remained locked. All windows secure. The basement door stood slightly ajar. I stopped, staring at it. I distinctly remembered checking this door before bed. I'd even jiggled the handle to make sure it was latched properly. Now it was open maybe 2 inches. Darkness visible beyond. "Must not have closed it all the way," I muttered, pulling it firmly shut and turning the lock. The old mechanism clicked into place with a satisfying sound. I completed my security check, verifying once more that everything was locked tight, then returned upstairs. Probably just the house settling, I told myself. Old doors in old houses don't always latch properly. The footsteps were likely pipes or the furnace cycling on. Back in bed, I tried to return to my book, but I couldn't concentrate. Every small sound now seemed amplified, suspicious. The wind rattled a window. A tree branch scraped against the siding. The refrigerator hummed to life downstairs. Around 2 in the morning, I finally drifted off. I woke to sunlight streaming through the bedroom window and the smell of coffee. I shot upright in bed, confused. I didn't own a coffee maker. I'd been planning to buy one today. Heart racing again, I pulled on jeans and a shirt and crept downstairs. The smell grew stronger as I approached the kitchen. I grabbed an umbrella from the hall closet, the only thing resembling a weapon I could find, and pushed open the kitchen door. Empty. No coffee maker. No fresh pot of coffee. Nothing. But the smell lingered, unmistakable and rich, as if someone had just brewed a full pot moments before. I checked every cabinet, every corner. Nothing could explain it. "You're losing it," I said aloud. Stress. New environment. Your mind is playing tricks. I made a mental note to see a doctor. Maybe the divorce had affected me more than I'd realized. Stress could cause hallucinations, couldn't it? Auditory and olfactory. I spent the morning unpacking and trying to shake off the unease from the previous night. Around noon, I decided to introduce myself to Mrs. Patterson. Maybe she could provide some rational explanation for the house's history, something to counter the ghost stories. I found her in her garden, tending to roses that looked as old as she did. She glanced up as I approached, her expression guarded. "Mrs. Patterson, I'm Michael Harrison. I just bought the house next door." She stood slowly, removing her gardening gloves. Up close, I could see she was probably in her late 70s, with sharp blue eyes that seemed to look right through me. "I know who you are," she said. Her voice was stronger than I expected. "I saw you move in yesterday. I was hoping you could tell me about the neighborhood, maybe about the house's history." Her expression hardened. "You want to know why everyone leaves?" The realtor mentioned some tenants had superstitious concerns. Superstitious. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Is that what Karen called it? That girl has sold her soul trying to move that property. So you believe the stories about the house being haunted?" Mrs. Patterson studied me for a long moment. "Come inside. I'll make tea." Her home was a stark contrast to mine. Warm, lived in, filled with photos of children and grandchildren. We sat in her kitchen while she prepared tea with practiced efficiency. "I moved to this street in 1978, she began. The Ashworth house was already notorious then, but the stories went back much further. Theodore Ashworth built it for his family in 1897. By all accounts, they were happy there for 15 years. "Until they disappeared," I said. "Until they were murdered." She set a cup of tea in front of me. "The police never found the bodies, so officially it remains a missing persons case. But there was blood. So much blood that it seeped through the floorboards in the master bedroom. That's your bedroom now, I suppose." I felt my stomach turn. The realtor didn't mention that. Of course she didn't. The blood was cleaned up long ago, the floors refinished multiple times, but the house remembers. She sipped her tea calmly. "Every family that's lived there since has reported the same things. Footsteps at night, doors opening on their own, the smell of coffee in the morning, because Theodore Ashworth insisted on fresh coffee every day at dawn. His wife would wake early to make it for him. That's—" I trailed off, unsure whether to admit what I'd experienced. "You've heard them already, haven't you? The footsteps?" Mrs. Patterson's eyes bore into mine. "And smelled the coffee this morning." I nodded slowly. "But that doesn't prove anything supernatural. Old houses make noise. Smells can linger in walls, or maybe a neighbor was brewing coffee and the scent drifted over." "Denial is common in the first few days," she interrupted. "Everyone who moves in thinks they'll be different. Rational, strong-minded. They all learn the truth eventually." "What truth?" She stood and walked to her window, looking toward my house. "That the Ashworth family never left. They're still there, trapped in the last moments of their lives. Theodore walks his usual patrol of the house before bed, checking locks and windows. His wife makes coffee every morning like she did for 30 years. The children—" She paused. "The children are the worst part. You'll hear them soon enough." "This is insane," I said, standing. "With all due respect, Mrs. Patterson, I don't believe in ghosts. There has to be a rational explanation." "Then find one." She turned back to me. "But do it quickly. Most people break after 3 days. Something about the third night, the activity escalates. That's when they see them, not just hear them. That's when most people run." "I'm not going to run from my own house because of ghost stories." "Pride," she said softly. "That's what Theodore Ashworth had too. It's what got him killed. Someone came for his family in the night, and his pride wouldn't let him believe he was in danger until it was too late." I thanked her for the tea and left, frustrated and unsettled. Back in my house, everything seemed perfectly normal in the daylight. I spent the afternoon researching the Ashworth murders online, finding numerous articles and blog posts about the case. The facts were grim. On March 15, 1912, Theodore Ashworth's business partner, James Merrick, arrived for a scheduled meeting. When no one answered the door, he let himself in with a spare key. He found massive amounts of blood in the master bedroom and throughout the house, but no bodies. The investigation revealed signs of a violent struggle, but no murder weapon was ever found, and no suspects were ever charged. Theories ranged from a home invasion gone wrong to Theodore himself murdering his family and fleeing. But witnesses confirmed seeing Theodore's distinctive horse and carriage in the barn that morning, and none of his money or valuables were missing. The case went cold within months. I closed my laptop as evening approached, determined to have a normal night. I made dinner, watched a movie on my laptop, and tried to ignore the growing sense of dread as darkness fell. Around 10, I headed upstairs to bed. I deliberately left lights on throughout the house, telling myself it was just until I got used to the place. As I brushed my teeth, I studied my face in the bathroom mirror. I looked tired, older than my 38 years. Behind my reflection in the mirror, the bathroom door slowly swung closed. I spun around. The door stood open exactly as I'd left it. I looked back at the mirror. In the reflection, the door was shut. My hands gripped the edge of the sink as I stared at the impossible sight. The real door remained open. The reflection showed it closed. I closed my eyes, counted to 10, and looked again. Both doors matched now, both open. Stress, I whispered. Just stress. Maybe I need to eat better. Sleep more. But my hands were shaking as I finished getting ready for bed. I lay awake for hours, every sense on high alert. Around midnight, I heard the footsteps again. This time they climbed the stairs slowly, each step creaking under invisible weight. They reached the landing and stopped directly outside my bedroom door. I stared at the door, watching the line of light beneath it, waiting for a shadow to pass. Nothing, but I could feel someone standing there, waiting. The sensation was so strong that my skin crawled. Then, very slowly, my doorknob began to turn. I watched in frozen horror as the doorknob rotated a full 90 degrees. The door remained closed, held by the lock I'd engaged before bed. The knob turned back to its original position, then turned again, testing. Whoever or whatever was on the other side wanted in. "Who's there?" My voice came out as barely a whisper. The doorknob stopped moving. Silence stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Then the footsteps retreated down the hallway, slow and deliberate, before descending the stairs. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, aiming it at the door. My hands shook so badly the beam of light danced across the walls. Every logical part of my brain screamed that this couldn't be happening, that there had to be an explanation. Faulty door mechanism, air pressure changes, something. But I'd felt the presence on the other side of that door, as surely as I'd ever felt anything in my life. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I sat propped against the headboard, lights on, phone in hand, listening to every sound. The footsteps didn't return, but around 4 in the morning I heard something else, a woman's voice humming softly. A lullaby, perhaps. The sound drifted up from somewhere downstairs, melodic and eerily beautiful. When dawn finally broke, I found myself standing at my bedroom window, staring at Mrs. Patterson's house. She was already awake, sitting on her porch with a cup of coffee, looking directly at my window. When our eyes met, she simply nodded, as if she'd expected to see me there, exhausted and terrified. The humming had stopped with the sunrise. I went downstairs on unsteady legs, half expecting to find someone in the house. Every room was empty, everything exactly as I'd left it. Except the basement door stood open again, despite being locked the night before. This time I approached it with my phone camera recording. The basement stairs descended into darkness, and I fumbled for the light switch. The bare bulb at the bottom flickered to life, illuminating the unfinished concrete space. I descended slowly, recording everything. The basement appeared completely normal. Furnace, water heater, some old shelving units, a workbench covered in dust. In the far corner, I noticed something I'd missed during my initial inspection. A patch of concrete that was slightly different in color from the rest, as if it had been repoured at some point. As I approached it, my phone's battery died, completely drained from 73% to 0 in an instant. The basement light flickered once, twice, then went out, plunging me into absolute darkness. Panic seized me. I turned and ran for the stairs, stumbling in the blackness, my hands scraping against the concrete walls as I felt my way forward. Behind me, I heard breathing, heavy, close, getting closer. I hit the stairs and scrambled up on my hands and knees, bursting through the basement door into the kitchen. I slammed it shut and locked it, then dragged a chair over and wedged it under the handle. My phone had somehow turned back on. The battery showed 73%. I stood there, breathing hard, staring at the phone in disbelief. I checked the recording I'd made. The video showed the basement exactly as I'd seen it, right up until the moment the camera pointed at that repaired section of concrete. Then the recording just ended, as if I'd stopped it myself. I spent the day outside, sitting on the porch, trying to convince myself I was experiencing some kind of breakdown, maybe carbon monoxide poisoning. I called a service company and paid extra for them to come out immediately. The technician arrived around noon and spent an hour checking every system in the house. "Everything's reading normal," he said, showing me the detector readings. "No carbon monoxide, no gas leaks. Your furnace is actually pretty new, probably replaced within the last 5 years. It's all working perfectly." After he left, I sat in my car in the driveway, seriously considering just leaving, abandoning the house, the money I'd spent, everything. Mrs. Patterson's words echoed in my mind. Most people break after 3 days. This was only day 2. My phone rang. Karen, the realtor. "Mr. Harrison, I hope you're settling in well," she said, her tone overly cheerful. "I just wanted to check in and see if you needed anything. I need to know the truth about this house." I kept my voice level. "All of it, not the sanitized version you gave me." Silence on the other end. "Then, I told you everything I legally had to disclose. What about the things you didn't have to legally disclose? The real reason 7 tenants left in 18 months? Mr. Harrison, were you ever going to tell me about the Ashworth murders? About the fact that multiple people have reported paranormal activity? About Margaret Chen's suicide? People kill themselves for all kinds of reasons," Karen said defensively. "There's no proven connection to the house. But you suspected one." Another long pause. "I've been a realtor for 12 years. I've sold hundreds of properties. This is the only one that's ever given me nightmares." Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "I needed the commission. My daughter has medical bills. I convinced myself that maybe you'd be different, that maybe nothing would happen to you. I'm sorry. What do you know about the basement? There's a section of concrete that's been repaired." "I don't know anything about that. The owner never mentioned it." "Who is the owner? The one who's supposedly overseas?" "I can't give you that information. Client confidentiality." "Karen, I'm living in a house where impossible things are happening. If you know something that could help me understand—" "Then leave," she interrupted. "Pack your things and leave. The owner might even buy it back at a loss if it means not having another incident. Just get out of there, Mr. Harrison, please." She hung up before I could respond. I sat in my car until the sun started setting, dreading what the night would bring. Mrs. Patterson came out onto her porch again, and this time I walked over to her. "You're still here," she observed. "That's brave, or foolish. Tell me about the third night. You said the activity escalates." She gestured for me to sit in the chair next to hers. "The first night, Theodore walks his rounds. The second night, his wife begins her morning routine early. Sometimes you'll hear her humming to the children. The third night," she paused. "The third night, you experience what they experienced, the night they died. That's impossible. You keep saying that word. Has it stopped anything from happening?" I had no answer. "The ones who've stayed for the third night all reported the same thing," Mrs. Patterson continued. "Around midnight, they hear breaking glass. Footsteps, but not Theodore's measured patrol. These are different, hurried, multiple people moving through the house. Then the screaming starts." My blood ran cold. "Screaming?" "The Ashworth family's last moments playing out like a recording. Some say they've seen shadows, figures struggling in the darkness. One man claimed he watched Theodore Ashworth fight with an intruder in the master bedroom, saw the knife come down again and again, saw the blood spray across the walls. When he ran from the house and called the police, there was nothing, no blood, no bodies, no evidence anyone had been there at all." "Why hasn't anyone investigated this properly? Brought in paranormal researchers or something?" "They have. 3 different teams over the years. Their equipment captured some interesting readings, but nothing conclusive. One investigator refused to return after the first night. Another finished the investigation, but won't talk about what she experienced. The third team's findings were somehow lost, all their footage corrupted. The sun had nearly set now, painting the sky in deep oranges and purples. My house stood dark and waiting. "You could stay here tonight," Mrs. Patterson offered. "I have a spare room." "And then what? Hide at your place every night? I can't live like that. I put everything I had into buying that house. Better to lose money than your life, or your sanity." I stood up. "I need to know what's really happening. If there's something in that basement, if the Ashworths really are there somehow, then there has to be a reason. Maybe they need help. Maybe they're trying to communicate something. Or maybe they're trapped in their final moments of terror and pain, and they're trying to pull you into it with them." Mrs. Patterson looked at me sadly. "Go if you must. But if you hear the glass breaking at midnight, run. Don't try to be a hero. Don't try to understand. Just run." I returned to my house as darkness fell completely. I turned on every light inside and out. I checked every lock 3 times. I even pushed furniture against the basement door. I tried to eat, but had no appetite. I tried to work, but couldn't concentrate. I sat in the living room watching the clock on my phone creep toward midnight. 11:15, 11:30, 11:45. At 11:57, my phone died again. Every light in the house went out simultaneously, plunging me into complete darkness. And then I heard it, the sound of breaking glass coming from upstairs. The breaking glass seemed to echo through the entire house, followed by the sound of something heavy hitting the floor upstairs. My heart hammered against my ribs as I fumbled in the darkness for my phone, but it remained dead, the screen black and unresponsive. More sounds now. Footsteps. Multiple sets moving quickly across the second floor. Heavy boots on hardwood. Then voices, muffled and indistinct, like hearing a conversation through water. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to follow Mrs. Patterson's advice and get out of the house, but something held me frozen. These weren't just random haunting sounds, this was a scene playing out, a memory trapped in time. And if I left now, I'd never understand what really happened to the Ashworth family. I felt my way to the stairs, using the banister as a guide. The voices grew clearer as I climbed. Men's voices, angry, demanding. "Where is it, Theodore? We know you have it." "I don't know what you're talking about. Please, my family." "Your family will be fine if you cooperate." "The documents, where are they?" I reached the landing, and moonlight from the hallway window provided just enough illumination to see shadows moving in the master bedroom. Not solid forms, but darkness against darkness, shapes that suggested human figures locked in struggle. "I destroyed them." Theodore's voice came from the bedroom, clearer now. "I couldn't live with what we'd done. The people who died because of our greed. You sanctimonious fool. Those documents could have protected all of us." The sound of a violent impact. A woman's scream from another room. Children crying. I moved toward the bedroom doorway, my journalistic instincts overriding my fear. I needed to see, to understand, to witness what had been hidden for over a century. The shadows in the bedroom coalesced into forms that were almost visible. 3 men surrounding a fourth. Theodore Ashworth, I realized, on his knees, blood already darkening his nightshirt. 2 more figures behind him, holding him in place. "Please," Theodore begged, "I'll give you anything else. Money, property, just spare my family." "It's too late for that." The tallest of the intruders stepped forward, and moonlight caught the blade in his hand. "You should have thought about consequences before you decided to grow a conscience." The knife came down. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. The scene played out with horrifying clarity. Theodore collapsed. The men moved with practiced efficiency to the other rooms. More screams. The sounds of furniture being overturned, drawers being ransacked. Then silence. The shadows faded, and I stood alone in the dark hallway, breathing hard. But the vision wasn't over. New sounds emerged from downstairs. Quieter now. The intruders were searching, methodical and thorough. "It's not here," one voice said. "Check the basement." The basement, the repaired section of concrete, the area that had made my phone die and the lights go out. I understood now. Theodore had hidden whatever documents they were searching for, and they'd never found them. The killers had poured fresh concrete over something in the basement, probably the bodies, and left. The house had kept the secret for 113 years, but the Ashworths hadn't left. They were trapped here, reliving their final moments, trying to tell their story to anyone who would listen long enough to understand. The lights flickered back on suddenly, making me jump. My phone buzzed to life in my hand, showing 12:17. The house was silent now, the vision complete. I went downstairs to the basement door. The furniture I'd piled against it had been pushed aside, the door standing open. I grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer and descended the stairs. The basement felt different now, heavier, charged with something I couldn't name. I approached the repaired section of concrete in the corner, kneeling beside it. Up close I could see it was definitely newer than the surrounding floor, probably poured sometime in the early 1900s, based on the aging patterns. I returned upstairs and grabbed a hammer from a toolbox I'd brought with me. Back in the basement, I hesitated only a moment before striking the concrete. It was old and brittle, cracking easily under the blows. It took me nearly an hour to break through a section large enough to see what lay beneath. My flashlight revealed a metal box about the size of a briefcase, wrapped in deteriorated oilcloth. I pulled it free carefully and carried it upstairs to the kitchen table. Inside the box were documents, dozens of them, preserved remarkably well by the airtight seal. Contracts, ledgers, correspondence between Theodore Ashworth and several other prominent Portland businessmen, including James Merrick, the business partner who'd discovered the crime scene. As I read through them, a picture emerged of massive fraud. Theodore and his partners had been running a scheme selling worthless timber rights to investors back east, taking millions of dollars that would be worth tens of millions today. When several investors had traveled west to inspect their purchases and discovered the fraud, they'd disappeared, murdered, according to Theodore's private journal also in the box, and their bodies disposed of in the Columbia River. Theodore had wanted out. His conscience had finally caught up with him. He'd documented everything, planning to turn the evidence over to authorities, but his partners had learned of his intentions and acted first. "We murdered those investors," Theodore had written in his final journal entry, dated March 14, 1912. "I cannot live with this guilt any longer. Tomorrow, I will bring these documents to the federal prosecutor. If something should happen to me before then, I pray someone will find this box and bring these men to justice. My family's blood cannot be on my hands as well, but something had happened to him, and his family had paid the price. I sat at the kitchen table as dawn broke, reading through every document, photographing each page with my phone. The names in these papers included some of the founding families of Portland, men whose descendants still held positions of power and influence. This was why the house couldn't sell. This was why the owner wanted it gone. Someone, somewhere, knew what was hidden here and had spent over a century trying to bury it. Around 7 in the morning, Mrs. Patterson knocked on my door. I let her in, and her eyes widened when she saw the documents spread across my table. "You found them," she breathed. "After all these years." "You knew?" I suspected. My husband was a historian before he passed. He researched the Ashworth case obsessively. He believed Theodore had been murdered because he knew too much about something, but he could never prove it. She picked up one of the contracts carefully. "This changes everything. This is evidence of crimes that destroyed families, that built fortunes on blood and lies. There's no statute of limitations on murder," I said. "Even if the killers are long dead, their estates could be held responsible, restitution to the victims' families, and the historical record needs to be corrected." Mrs. Patterson smiled. "You're going to publish this story, aren't you?" "It's what I do." I looked around the kitchen, feeling the house differently now, lighter somehow. Theodore wanted the truth to come out. He died trying to make it happen. I think that's why the house kept pushing people away, waiting for someone who would listen long enough to understand. Over the following weeks, I worked with historians, genealogists, and attorneys to verify the documents and trace the victims' families. My article, published by a major national magazine, caused exactly the scandal I'd expected. Several prominent Portland families faced serious legal challenges. Descendants of the murdered investors finally got acknowledgement of what had happened to their ancestors. The house changed after that night. The footsteps stopped. No more phantom coffee smells or humming lullabies. The doors stayed closed when I shut them. It was as if the Ashworth family had finally been able to move on, their story told, their truth revealed. I stayed in the house, renovating it slowly, turning it into the home Theodore had intended it to be. Mrs. Patterson became a good friend, often joining me for dinner and sharing stories about the neighborhood's real history, not the sanitized version. Karen called 6 months later, profuse in her apology. The mysterious overseas owner had been revealed to be a descendant of James Merrick, Theodore's business partner and probable murderer. He'd inherited the property and had been trying to sell it quietly, hoping the documents would remain hidden forever. He withdrew from the sale process entirely once my article was published, wanted nothing more to do with the property or the scandal. I bought the house from him for $1 through a legal settlement, with the stipulation that I would maintain it as a historical landmark. The basement became a small museum, telling the true story of the Ashworth family and the corruption they died exposing. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear the old house settling, stairs creaking, wind rattling the windows, but these are just the normal sounds of an old Victorian, nothing more. The presence that had filled the rooms, that had driven away 7 tenants in 18 months, was gone. On the anniversary of their deaths, March 15th, I always leave fresh coffee brewing in the morning, a small tribute to Eleanor Ashworth, who'd made it every day for her husband. And sometimes, just sometimes, I catch the faint scent of lilacs, Eleanor's favorite flower, drifting through the rooms. I discovered why nobody stayed more than 3 days. They were afraid of the truth. But the truth, as terrifying as it had been to uncover, had set everyone free. The Ashworth family, the descendants of their victims, even me in a way I hadn't expected. I'd bought a house for $45,000. What I'd really bought was a mystery that had waited 113 years to be solved. And in solving it, I'd found not just a home, but a purpose. The house at the end of Maple Street stands quiet now, its secrets finally revealed, its ghosts finally at rest. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. Leave your like. It's quick, free, and shows me I'm on the right path. Subscribe and turn on the bell to never miss our upcoming stories. Thank you for being here with me. See you in the next story.